deeper behind the headlines with our guest analyst, who we've invited to help us explore the news and issues of the day. And today we have the current affairs analyst, Professor of Communications and Deputy Dean of the Postgraduate School at Bayes University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Prof, good to see you again. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.
There's a lot going on. We've got less than 2 weeks to the inauguration. We know there are moves in court to even try and stop that inauguration, whether or not that's going to happen. I mean, how much, this is what we were discussing with the first guest, does that kind of leave a bad taste and a bad cloud hanging over this inauguration, which ought to be a moment of celebration?
Well, it's one of mixed feelings, actually, you know, but we also know that we're in a democracy, and democracy is weaved around a system, and that system is powered by regulations. So if we want laws, you know, and most importantly, the Constitution, if we want to put it that way. So the constitutional stipulations are what we should abide by, and that's what I think we are following, you know, whether we are happy about it or not. And that's what they tell us most of the time, that law is not about morality. You know, law is about, you know, stipulations, you know, lay down procedures for humanity, for human beings, members, citizens in a society to follow. You know, we've set out for ourselves democracy, and there's a constitution that we're supposed to follow, which we're supposed to go by. Otherwise, you know, we'll see something else that we probably cannot handle, which is why it is important for us to just continue to go the way we are going. We have a president that has been declared by INEC. The other thing is for people who are aggrieved, and rightly so, to go to court. They have gone to court. You know, we have a date, you know, for handover. You know, that date has been fixed. Arrangements are going on, preparations are going on towards the actualization, the realization of that day. That is expected to happen, and of course it's going to happen, you know, from the optics that we are seeing around us. So those procedures are in place. We do not expect any deviation. And of course, if at the end of the day we follow these things through, and we'll have a final pronouncement by the courts. You know, the onus is on all of us as citizens, whether we like it or not, to go by the dictates of the courts. And of course, within it actually might be frustrations, might be irritations. I keep talking about this, you know, but as long as there's a laid down rule, sometimes there's no rule, there's no outcome that will actually favor all parties in a system. There will be sections of the society that are not in tune with it, that are not happy. But of course, again, that state of unhappiness will have to be submerged within the larger framework of regulations, of law, as the case could be.
Well, I mean, the problem here is that there is so much negativity generated by this presidential election. And every time you think that the democratic spirit of this country should be moving forward and taking the people along in that forward movement, there just seems to be an anticlimax. I mean, if you remember, for example, when June 12th happened, it was that same kind of spirit that the country had come and said, oh, we're going to move things forward. And then suddenly it's 2 steps backwards.
I see what you mean. There's so much negativity, no doubt. Each day we'll think that we're heading towards peace. We're heading towards a meaningful resolution where the atmosphere will be one of those where we're all now on the same page, where we're expecting ecstasy, enthusiasm. You see one damning report or the other, like the one that the BBC won today. But I want to say that it's not really the June 12 situation we are dealing with now. That was a major coup against an election. That was very, very drastic, unfortunately radical, you know, orchestrated by a leader that probably didn't want to go, all kinds of rigmarole, some kind of maradonic...
Yeah, but I'm talking about the impact on the spirit of the people.
The impact are actually slightly different, but this one is just one of perception. You know, a deafening, disturbing, worrisome perception, which I think will be rectified by the final pronouncement of the courts, you know. And that's why we are very trusting. We are reinvesting our hope in the judiciary that at the end of the day, they'll come out with a satisfactory, or you know, I don't know how to describe it now, with a position that everybody will feel okay with. You know, we cannot,
as long as justice is seen to be done.
You know, and we cannot dictate to them. That's taken for granted. But of course, there will be a final pronouncement, and we hope that to be a closure. You know, a closure to the controversies, and of course, we can now move on towards more important issues around statecraft around development, around growth, in the build-up to another round of election in 4 years' time, hopefully.
Right. You mentioned the BBC's report there, so that kind of, we segue sort of into it because that has come out basically today. As Sumner and I were discussing, Western governments tend to act on a lot of things. Like it becomes their kind of guide. So you wonder what that is going to bode for Nigeria. And this is coming just a day after the US announced visa restrictions on select unnamed Nigerians for undermining the 2023 elections. We don't know who is on that list. But we do know that Western governments often cooperate when it comes to people being sanctioned. So these individuals may suddenly find that they're, having difficulty getting visas to the UK and to the European Union as well. But it's all that comes together to cast a shadow over this inauguration.
Yeah, it will cast really. But first of all, I had Sumner clearly, and I tend to agree with him largely. The focusing on Rivers State isn't really new because we had Yaga's earlier pronouncement that Imo and Rivers are actually suspects. And of course, Premium Times did an investigative story that also revealed the same. And BBC is reinforcing it, It's all right, but I would have wanted us to pay some other attention to maybe some other states or some other areas, perhaps so we can get a good representation. Because for now, concentrating on Rivers isn't a good sample for what happened in the 36 or the 37 states of the Federation, as the case could be, given the controversy about whether Abuja is a state or not. So let's have this investigation spreading beyond just one locality, so we can have a good representation. Because at the end of the day, if, for instance, at the end of the day, peradventure Rivers is said to be taken out, will it affect the overall election, or will it do credit or discredit to it? Eventually. So why can't we have a more investigation?
Well, I mean, in fairness to the point you're making. Rivers State is clearly one state.
That's right.
And what has been found there is not sufficient to change the overall national outcome, but it could become a bellwether.
Absolutely. We're not saying that what is going to happen didn't happen, or whether it happened or not. That's not the question. But we're saying that we have 36, 37 states. At this stage, we have had two credible organizations, Yaga, Premium Times, casting aspersions on the result in Rivers. Now, BBC has also come to reinforce it. We can also have some other
you have
this
a
kind
point.
of investigative reports in some other states,
you
so that we
certainly
can
have
begin
a
to form
point.
a stronger opinion.
That's a good point. And in terms of reaction to these findings from the Electoral Commission, INEC, it's the classic answer, isn't it? Well, it's in court. And we can't comment.
It's been said really that the judiciary is also a stage in the electioneering process, and after they have declared, the next stage is for the courts to take over, and that's what the courts are doing. Do not forget that INEC is a statutory organization. It's a public institution, and the gentlemen, they are guided by laws, by regulations.
Well, some would say that's a bit fresh, given the way they ran the elections, for them to have been guided by laws.
They want to keep
the very laws that they themselves didn't follow, their own guidelines.
Maybe we're also being guided by laws, or by stipulated expectations. That's the ideal. We are sticking to the ideal. The ideal is that they will muffle their opinion for now, and just stick to processes, as the case could be, so that they will not run into trouble. I think that's what they're trying to do, trying to play smart in the circumstance.
It's always brilliant talking with you and getting the benefit of your wise counsel.
Yes.
Professor Abiodun Edeniyi is a current affairs analyst, professor of communications and deputy dean of the postgraduate school at Bayes University in Abuja. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye and thank you for